Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about boundaries. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, as a tech lead, how would you draw boundaries for what your application should support? So usually the way I do it is that I try to figure out the stakeholders of the system and roughly the needs of the various stakeholders. And this touches on something I've repeated many times before, which is that you need to understand the problem that you are solving. And you need to have a decent understanding, product mindset, call it business mindset, call it whatever you want, right? Uh, that allows you to see who is the customer of all this. And I'm not just talking about the end user now, I'm talking about the actual customer. I'll give you a very concrete example because it's actually something that I've been doing quite recently, which has posed its own challenges actually, because this can get really tricky when you're dealing with more than with different software developers who don't really have this mindset. So to give you a very short story, a while back I was asked to join a team or take over a new project, which where the role which I would hold was basically technical product manager, which in a sense is product manager, I assume, but I have technical knowledge. That's what I'm guessing. And so my manager said to me basically that we're going to create this CMS system. It's going to handle different content across the different systems within the company that I was working for. And basically we need you to take over the, well, it's my manager, so usually it means, hey, do all the things, fix all the things, do the coding if that's necessary, fix the work practices and work structure if that's necessary, etc., etc. And so I go into this team, and basically when I start, I take a look at like this. Well, it's a headless CMS under the hood, or it's a bunch of APIs basically that serve up different content, but there's also a UI interface which is used by different content managers that use this system. And the idea being basically that, well, they should be able to, do translations, upload files, or structure pages, so all the things that you can imagine, a basic version of what you can imagine from things like WordPress or similar sorts of things, right? But for this specific company. And so I have a talk with the acting tech lead at the team, and like the different developers, and I sort of try to figure out which is usually the first thing that I always do. If you ever work with me, you will see me do that. I'll start asking a bunch of questions because I'm trying to do an inventory basically of all the things and try to get the lay of the land. And so after you look at the code, you talk to the people and you try to understand the backlog and so forth and so forth. And I very quickly figure out that the team doesn't actually know what this system is going to do. They don't know what the boundaries are because they have never actually taken the time to fully understand the scope and all the different people and their different perspective of what should be delivered. And that basically comes down to poor work practices, or like that nobody's really owning that area or taking responsibility. There's like one or two people who sort of should be doing it, but they're not really up to the task, or like not really doing it in a good way, as what I understood, right? And so I look at the code, and the code is also in a sort of, let's just say, fairly shitty state for a system of this complexity. And so now I've had my chance to take a look at that, and I take a look, and then so I sort of know where we are right now in terms of quality and practices and what the team has been doing, and sort of like what we would need to address if we want to make this into something more serious. But now the question becomes, because I can't ask the team, because the team doesn't really know themselves exactly where the boundaries are of this system. So I go and I talk to the users, like the content managers, or like the people who are going to use the system, and I start asking them about, all right, what systems are you using today? Could you tell me about sort of how you work today, and then I do a shadow session with them. And a shadow session is basically just I sit down and I ask them to show me how they work, like what do they do. It's nothing more complicated than that. And like I asked them, if you were to train me to become your new coworker, what would you show me? And then we sit and I talk and I ask questions, and they show me, yeah, usually you go to this system here and I click here and I do that and I do this, and this is usually it. And I ask a bunch of questions related to the work practices and like the flow. And that gives me a rough idea of what they are accustomed to doing with the system, or like what they sort of do. This is basically a user journey for the designers out there. You're basically doing that. You're mapping out in this case I have an existing workflow that I basically need to replicate, in essence, like a simplified version of it. And then finally I asked them about the system that we have and sort of asked them to try it out a little bit and see what works, what doesn't work, etc., etc. And I get the feedback on that, and then I get a whole bunch of like wish lists and like all these different thoughts, and like it's sort of I'll touch on that as well, because my manager, of course, is warning me that, well, yeah, but you have to know about all of these things as well, because he is another stakeholder, which and he has a different perspective on this. And so what I'm doing here is basically just I'm trying to gather the raw material, the raw feedback of everything. I'm not in any way saying, again, this is something I had to explain to the acting tech lead, just because you have a bunch of ideas, just because it's better for you to let your coworkers and like your different stakeholders come with suggestions and act as if they are serious suggestions, and then put in a cadence system for what's going to happen first. Basically, anybody can come with a suggestion, because that makes them feel like they can contribute. But what ultimately decides what's in scope and what's out of scope is the priority. You put it in comparison to something else. So if something is very, very important, you put that at the top of the backlog. But if something they come with a new suggestion, even if they really want to do it, that is still fact-checked against the stakeholders, and you ask the stakeholders, here's our other cool idea. Is that more important than that? Because you can't do both at the same time. That automatically creates a system of cadence, and and then he basically goes, oh, but that means that we're never going to do this thing. Yeah, that's exactly what it means. It doesn't matter, because it's still an idea that you can keep around. The person got some sense that they were heard, they felt like we were listening, and that's all they needed. That's the entire exercise, and that means that our connection to them now grew stronger because they felt heard. Even if we're never going to do it, even if you and I both know that, it's better for them to feel as if we are listening to them, because we are, than it is for you to go and say, that's a bad idea, don't, we're never going to do that, because you're communicating the wrong thing. And then finally you go, and I go to my stakeholder, my manager, and I ask, right, what do you types of budget, and what are we trying to achieve here? And he basically goes, yeah, so we have this really big expensive system that does all of this stuff, and we need a simplified version of this system to sort of cap the cost of this system, and so most of the stuff that they're using is fairly basic, so we want you to just make something that's super stable, super simple to use, and just lets them do the basics of what they need to do, because we don't want to recreate this super system. Now I know all the people that are involved in delivering this thing. I know what the developers think about it, how they act, and what they sort of do, and how they what we need to address here. I know what the customers what their workflow looks like. I know them on a first name basis. I can talk to them, and I can ask them about feedback and things like that. And I know my manager, the person who actually paying for the whole thing. What's their stake in it? Now I know the boundaries, and then I show these are the features that I have gathered we need to deliver, and then I present that to my manager and share my thoughts. This is what I'm thinking we're going to build, and I do that with the stakeholders, and I have a continuous feedback loop with them when we develop the features. We basically make a proof of concept, show them, is this the thing you're looking for, and we iterate on the thing. That gives me the boundaries of what I need, because now I have the perspective of all the people involved. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I draw boundaries for what an application should support really comes down to understanding the range of the stakeholders that you have in the company. And stakeholders doesn't necessarily mean customer; it means whoever is going to consume the system. And this is the level of this is a lot of the work that you will do once you get to a certain level of within your career, when you're basically responsible not just for, as I've said, now you're getting into the sphere of you're getting to be able to call yourself an architect or a senior, or like, at least by my definition, because now your response, you can't just say, oh, I just did what was in the story card, because you're making the story card, or you're directly responsible for the end result, not just shipping a single feature. When you get to this level, it's usually, as I said, a good idea to create a bit of a network of the people who make up sort of all the decisions that you or have a stake in the decisions that you're going to make. And so you get the perspective of the user, you get the perspective of whoever is paying for the thing, like the manager, so forth and so forth, and you get the perspective of the team. And then you take that, creates a bit of a boundary for you. This is sort of what I'm dealing with. You get that holistic understanding of things, right? And then when it comes to features and so forth, and what should be in scope and what should be out of scope, it really comes down to just making a draft of what you think based on the feedback that you have received from the different stakeholders, and saying, all right, this thing here, we can only do these things, which, like, prioritize them. Help me understand which one is more important to you as the user, which one is more important to you as the manager, or so forth and so forth, and then you go from there. The important part is to not do the thing that I was talking about with my about what the team was doing, which is that they don't really know this, like they don't have a communication whatsoever, so they're sort of just doing whatever they want, which leads it's inevitably going to lead to the thing that was actually happening, which was a lot of features that nobody really used. The system wasn't really used by anybody, and it didn't really meet the requirements. That's the thing that happens when you don't have a connection, like a product mindset or a business mindset. That part is very, very important if you're going to be able to set the boundaries, because you have to understand the problem that you are solving, as I said. And it doesn't matter if it's a application like this, or it's a back-end service or something like that. Someone is consuming this, you are making it for someone, and someone is paying for it. You need to know what their perspective is on this thing before you start drawing up your boxes and designing everything. Have a great day.